30 years ago, accessing the internet was a privilege for a few. Less than 1% of the world's population had this possibility. And even then, it was an extremely limited service. Just 3 decades later, and everything has changed. Today, 2/3 of the world's people access the internet. That's more than 5 billion connected human beings. The internet has become part of our lives. And for many people, having access to it is almost as fundamental as electricity or piped gas. After all, we spend a good part of the day online. In Brazil alone, each person spends on average more than 9 hours a day on their cell phone, computer, or other electronic devices. And with our heavy dependence on networks, it makes us wonder, what would the world be like if the internet ceased to exist?
Hey, Pedro here. This video you are watching was originally in Portuguese, my native language. This is the attempt of our team to translate it to English, and I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Your feedback is extremely important to us. Now, back to the video.
Before we get into an imagination exercise, it's good for you to know that there have been situations where millions of people were without access to the internet for long periods, and some of them were for quite unusual reasons. One of my favorite stories happened on March 28, 2011, when an elderly woman cut a cable and left an entire country without internet. And this happened in Armenia, a country located between Europe and Asia. A 75-year-old woman was looking for scrap metal to recycle. And she found a cable that she thought was copper and might be worth some money. So she cut a piece of that cable. And just like that, the entire Armenia, as well as parts of Georgia and Azerbaijan, were without internet for 12 hours. That's because all over the world, the internet depends on a network of millions of kilometers of fiber optic cables. Many of them are underwater. This map shows there are huge cables up to 20,000 kilometers long connecting the continents. I really hope that lady from Armenia doesn't see this video. One of the factors that could lead to an internet blackout in some places has to do with these cables. Here in Brazil, for example, a desalination plant that is set to be built at Praia do Futuro in Fortaleza is causing concern. The location gathers cabling of 8 telecommunications companies responsible for 99% of our data traffic. The fear is some unforeseen event during construction could take down the internet in a large part of Brazil. The deliberate actions of authorities also pose a threat to the internet in some regions. In 2019, political conflicts led India to limit internet access in Kashmir, which has more than 10 million inhabitants. This lasted over a year and a half. The same thing happened in some countries during the Arab Spring in 2010, and nothing prevents it from happening again in the future, on an even larger scale. Some experts even say that if the United States wanted to, they would be able to shut down the internet worldwide. Yeah, it's scary to think that the connection of so many people is under the control of so few people, and it's just a few. In this book, Error 404, Prepared for a World Without Internet, researcher Esther Paniagua explains that global internet is in the hands of 14 people in the United States. This group of guardians is responsible for controlling the DNS system. It is what translates IP addresses into domain names. Without it, the content on the internet would still exist, but it would be inaccessible. These 14 guardians meet every 6 months to update the system, and they even need to bring a physical key to these meetings. It feels like a spy movie. And another reason leaving our connection hanging by a thread is wars. This is what happened in Yemen a few years ago. The entire country was offline for days due to an airstrike that hit the state-owned company managing internet access in the country. Now imagine this on a global scale. Specialists say that there are about 30 buildings that are the critical points of the global connection system. And if simultaneous attacks are made on all of them, the global internet basically stops working. Now, really far from Earth, another factor that can put our connection at risk is solar storms. This year, some newspapers even reported that the increase in the sun's activity cycle could lead to a large coronal mass ejection, which in turn could distort the Earth's magnetic field and cause an internet blackout. It's not exactly that. As I explained in this other video, we still do not have the ability to accurately predict, nor with much advance notice, how and when the next solar storm will occur. This could happen at any moment, but only an extremely strong and extremely unlikely storm would cause a widespread internet outage here on Earth. But just out of curiosity, let's imagine. What if that happened? What if any of these scenarios I have presented so far caused a total and permanent blackout of our connection? What would our life be like if overnight the internet simply ceased to exist? Well, the first major challenge would be knowing that it happened. After all, our main tool for discovering what is happening in the world is the internet itself. Without it, we would take a while to get an idea of the extent of the damage. At first, you would check your modem or try to reconnect to your cell phone network, maybe turn it on and off a few times. Then you would call your service provider, and they may not be able to assist you, since millions of people would be experiencing the same problem at the same time. The news that the internet of the whole world is down would probably come through the television, but you can be sure that it wouldn't be that fast. And that's because the internet is fundamental for journalists to communicate with correspondents in other parts of the world. The realization that the failure is global would require many phone calls, and the news outlets themselves would have difficulty determining exactly what had happened. By the way, information as a whole would be severely impacted if the internet came to an end. Think about all the texts, photos, videos, all the content that is only available online without a physical copy. To give you an idea, the amount of data on the internet as a whole is in the range of zettabytes. This is equivalent to 1 trillion gigabytes. On Wikipedia, there are more than 1 million pages. Losing them would be the 21st century equivalent of the burning of the Library of Alexandria. To search for information without Google, the way would be to resort to old paper encyclopedias, which are updated at a much slower pace than any website nowadays. And then the students would understand the drama of the life of people over 30 years old. Our social life would also not be the same anymore. Without social networks, we would lose the great environments for debate and discussion of ideas shaping our everyday life. We would never have memes on X, photos on Instagram, dances on TikTok, or long posts on LinkedIn again, and I'm sure you also wouldn't know almost anyone's birthday anymore. Communication with our friends would also change radically. Without our daily WhatsApp, the best solution for a long-distance chat would be either sending a letter or making a phone call, like the ancient Aztecs. And without dating apps, the only way to meet someone would be face-to-face. We would need to find new ways to have fun. First, because the dinosaur game Google offers when the internet goes down would become boring. And for those who like movies and series, there would be no more streaming services. It would be the return of video rental stores. This point you might be thinking it wouldn't be so bad. People would meet more in person. And maybe everyone would start to get a little closer again. That may be true, but a life without the internet would have many other negative points. In education, for example, the option for distance learning, which has become so common in recent years, would no longer exist. In health, telemedicine would be impossible. Even in-person appointments would be impacted. The registration services, appointment scheduling, and exam booking were also going offline, making life harder. In the environment, monitoring wildfires would become much more complicated, which could even drive the destruction of forests, and the area of technology would be completely impacted. Artificial intelligence, which has the power to revolutionize the world, would go back to being an idea in fiction books. The Internet of Things, which allows the integration of everyday objects, would also no longer exist, preventing the current trend of automating our homes and our entire lives, and the future of autonomous cars would be completely threatened. Speaking about transportation, we would need to navigate with paper maps. In some cities, traffic lights and automatic tolls would suddenly stop working, causing real knots in the traffic. The coordination of trains and subways would break down, and in air transport, the situation would be even worse. Communication between control towers would face problems, and with the sudden possibility of booking tickets over the internet, it would likely start a real air chaos on a global level. And it is for these and other reasons that certainly the biggest impact of the end of the internet would be on the economy. We would probably face an unprecedented global crisis. All companies that sell only online would cease to exist. But even physical stores would suffer, as they rely on a long supply chain that includes everything from inventory control to ways of receiving payments from customers. And if there's no internet, credit card and debit card, also relying on the internet, as most card machines send data via the web. Cash is only used in 1 out of every 10 payments. You might not even remember the last time you made a purchase using paper money. This makes us realize that money nowadays is just a bunch of numbers on a screen. A person being richer than another does not necessarily mean they have more real estate or more material goods, as it used to be. It all comes down to the number of zeros on an app screen. Therefore, the end of the internet would mark the beginning of a catastrophe in the financial system. Right away, all digital banks would be wiped out. And the wave of bankruptcies would quickly also hit traditional banks and brokerages, where stocks are bought and sold. Nowadays, the entire process is done virtually, so imagine the impact that the lack of internet would cause. No need to imagine. This calculation has been done. According to NetBlocks, which monitors the internet, a single day without internet in the United States, for example, would cause a loss of more than $11 billion to the economy. And all because of a technology failure. And this problem would be repeated in various corners of the world, especially in countries whose economy is more connected to the virtual world. There are countries, such as South Korea, where almost half of the entire GDP depends directly on the internet. By the way, if we take the 8 most valuable companies in the world today, 7 are in technology and internet. Therefore, another serious consequence of the economic crisis from the end of the internet would be mass unemployment. In Brazil, there are over 2 million app-based workers and countless other internet-dependent professions. From delivery drivers, to web designers and web journalists, to digital influencers. Everyone would be affected in some way by the crash in the economy. The internet is present even where it does not seem to be, where we don't even notice. The truth is, we have turned everything into a computer. From small daily activities to major global decisions, everything nowadays depends on the electronic brain of the internet. And we have forgotten how to live without it. Maybe for older people it would be easier, but for almost all of Generation Z who were born into a connected world, they can't imagine a world without this technology. It is not an exaggeration to say that many people need treatments to deal with this withdrawal. Our society has turned the idea of being connected into an obligation. And if just a few hours without the internet makes some people lose their minds, how would they be after days, months, or even years? The world would certainly live in a dystopia. It's even hard to imagine what it would be like. You could say that humanity would regress decades, but it wouldn't just be a matter of going back to life as it was in the past. We no longer have the same technologies from back then. It would be necessary to resume the manufacturing of equipment such as fax machines, for example, but the production lines would need some time to start producing all these technologies again. Probably, life in this imagined future would be worse than it actually was in the past. In this fictional scenario, we would have known a different world. We would know there was something, the internet, which was a universe full of infinite possibilities, and that from one day to the next, all of them ran out. But perhaps the saddest these problems caused by the end of the internet would be that Scienceverse would no longer exist. The good thing is that all of this is practically impossible to happen, at least in such a lasting way. So take advantage of the fact that the internet exists. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your video suggestion in the comments. That's how the idea for this video came about. Thank you very much and see you next time.